Joe Biden was presented by his supporters as a return to normalcy following 4 turbulent years of the Trump administration.
Do you miss me yet? Do you miss me yet?
After winning the 2020 election, many described the longtime senator and former vice president as honest, trustworthy, consistent. This is, however, demonstrably untrue. In reality, the only consistent thing about Joe Biden is his inconsistency and his unwavering ability to flip on any and all policies, whichever way the political winds are blowing.
I don't know.
Let's take a look at some of Joe Biden's biggest flip-flops during his 50 years in office. When it comes to COVID-19, there's almost too many flips to count. In January 2020, Biden criticized Donald Trump for stoking fear and stigma during the 2014 Ebola epidemic, and that reactionary travel bans would only make things worse. He criticized Trump for hysterical xenophobia and fear-mongering, decrying travel ban policies.
This is no time for Donald Trump's record of hysterical xenophobia, and fear-mongering.
In March of 2020, Biden criticized the suspension of travel from some European countries.
Banning all travel from Europe or any other part of the world, as we've seen, it will not stop it.
However, later that same month, the Biden campaign expressed support for travel restrictions. In January 2021, Biden reinstated travel restrictions on most non-US travelers from Brazil, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and 26 other European countries that allow travel across open borders, also adding South Africa to the list.
President Biden has decided to maintain the restrictions previously in place. With the pandemic worsening and more contagious variants spreading, this isn't the time to be lifting restrictions on international travel.
Then there's the subject of vaccine hesitancy. In September 2020, Biden appeared to undermine confidence in the COVID-19 vaccine.
When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay. I'm not being facetious.
Now, Biden is condemning a pandemic of the unvaccinated and doesn't think too highly of those who followed his lead.
You're not vaccinated, you're not nearly as smart as I thought you were.
What was your reaction? Why did you think he was saying these things to you?
Joe Biden's involvement in the Me Too and Believe All Women narrative began in 1991 when he was criticized for leading an all-white, all-male judiciary committee and grilling Anita Hill in excruciatingly graphic detail.
Tell the committee what was the most embarrassing of all the incidences that you have alleged.
But the fact is, flatly, he never asked you to look at pornographic movies with him.
Are you a scorned woman?
It is appropriate to ask Professor Hill anything any member wishes to ask her to plumb the depths of her credibility.
Throughout my 53 years and 7 months on this earth until last week, no one ever accused me of any kind of sexual misconduct.
Bending to the demands of the Me Too movement, which arose during the time of the contentious Brett Kavanaugh hearings in 2018, Biden apologized to Anita Hill, expressing his regret for what she endured.
I am sorry she was treated the way she was treated.
When asked about Hill's accusations, Biden said that he believed her and that we should always presume women are telling the truth when they make allegations of sexual assault.
Women should be believed. I believed Anita Hill. I said I believed Anita Hill. The woman should be given the benefit of the doubt and not be abused again by the system.
But when he himself was accused of sexual assault by Tara Reid,
he had his hands underneath my clothes.
The same presumption wasn't applied.
To use your words, should we not start off with the presumption that the essence of what she's talking about is real? She says you sexually assaulted her.
Look, from the very beginning, I've said believing women means taking the woman's claims seriously. When she steps forward and then vet it, look into it. The truth matters.
On China, arguably the United States' greatest adversary on the world stage, Joe Biden appeared to mimic Trump's rhetoric during his campaign, saying that China poses a threat. But Joe was making a very different argument just 1 month before.
China is going to eat our lunch? Come on, man. They can't even figure out how to deal with the fact that they have this great division between the China Sea and the mountains in the west.
If we don't get moving, they're gonna eat our lunch.
So in a matter of a few weeks, Biden claimed China was and was not competition for the US. When it comes to the broad topic of LGBT rights, Joe Biden will often recall one of his many childhood tales.
My dad, God love him. It was 1961. He dropped me off at the town square, Rodney Square, and there were 2 men in suits, and they kissed. as I was getting out of the car, and I looked back at my dad, like I hadn't seen that before, and he said, "It's simple, Joe. They love each other."
But this seems to contradict the vast majority of his policy history on the matter. For example, when he met with a gay activist in 1973 about homosexuals working in government, Biden said, quote, "My gut reaction is that they, homosexuals, are security risks, but I must admit I haven't given this much thought. I'll be darned." In 1994, Biden voted to cut off funding for schools which taught the acceptance of homosexuality. In 1996, Biden voted in favor of the Defense of Marriage Act, which blocked federal recognition of same-sex marriages. And as recently as 2006, Biden made his stance pretty clear.
The Defense of Marriage Act, we've all voted, not where I voted and others said, look, marriage is between a man and a woman, and states must respect that.
Just a few years later, Biden flipped again.
I am absolutely comfortable with the fact that men marrying men, women marrying women, and heterosexual men and women marrying men all are entitled to the same exact rights, all the civil rights, all the civil liberties. And quite frankly, I don't see much of a distinction beyond that.
In the aftermath of the widespread Black Lives Matter protests and riots that broke out in 2020, Joe Biden flipped on numerous policies related to violent crime. Biden, who once gave passionate speeches on the Senate floor arguing that one could be a progressive and lock the SOBs up,
And I'd say lock the SOBs up.
now states that his 1990s crime bill was a big mistake when it was made.
You know, I've been in this fight for a long time. I haven't always been right. I know we haven't always gotten things right. It was a big mistake when it was made.
Biden has continued to argue that we must admit that systemic racism exists.
White America has to admit there still is systematic racism, and it goes almost unnoticed by so many of us.
Despite the fact that the system being criticized was largely built by Biden himself. Biden has also flipped on the subject of the criminalization of marijuana. During his campaign, he stood for decriminalization, and Kamala Harris, now his vice president, famously admitted to smoking the drug during an interview.
Have you ever smoked?
I have.
Okay. Like in
And
college, or-
I inhale. I did inhale.
However, in March, dozens of White House staffers were suspended, asked to resign, or placed on remote work programs because of past marijuana use, even if they used it completely legally in their home states. For decades, Joe Biden voted in what would now be considered a pro-life manner. In 1976, he voted for the Hyde Amendment, which prevented the use of federal funds for abortion in almost all cases. He then voted again to save it in 1993, but now he opposes the Hyde Amendment, offering the following explanation during a Planned Parenthood event in 2019.
It became really clear to me that although the Hyde Amendment was designed to try to split the difference here to make sure women still had access, you can't have access if, in fact, everyone's covered by a federal policy. That's why at the same time I announced that policy, I announced that I can no longer continue to abide by the Hyde Amendment.
Again in 2019, Biden claimed that women's health is under assault like we haven't seen in the last 50 years.
The fact of the matter is that women's rights and women's health are under assault like we haven't seen in the last 50 years.
But according to present-day Biden, past Biden would have been part of that supposed assault. The Foreign Assistance Act of 1981 still contains a Biden amendment, which was added to ban American aid from being used in research related to abortions. While Joe now says that he wants to enshrine Roe v. Wade into law, in 1973 he said Roe v. Wade went too far. Biden has also advocated for the ability of states to overturn Roe v. Wade, was in favor of the Mexico City policy, which prevented federal funds from being allocated to organizations which provided or expanded abortion services, and has voted to ban partial birth abortion on 2 occasions. Okay, now for the speed round. Here are numerous flip-flops just from Biden's first 100 days in office. During his presidential campaign, Biden condemned the Trump administration for its child separation policy.
Their kids were ripped from their arms and separated. And now they cannot find over 500 sets of those parents, and those kids are alone. It's criminal.
However, according to Homeland Security, there are still more than 15,000 migrant children in custody across the country as of late July 2021. In early December 2020, Biden pledged to open most schools during his first 100 days in office.
My team will work to see that a majority of our schools can be open by the end of my first 100 days.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki then had to walk this back just a few months later.
His goal that he set is to have the majority of schools, so more than 50%, open by day 100 of his presidency. And that means some teaching in classrooms. So at least one day a week, hopefully it's more. And obviously it is as much as is safe in each school and local district.
In 2005, he supported the filibuster as a method of achieving compromise.
At its core, the filibuster is not about stopping a nominee or a bill. It's about compromise and moderation. That's why the founders put unlimited debate in.
In 2021, he claimed that the filibuster is a relic of the Jim Crow era.
With regard to the filibuster, I believe we should go back to a position of the filibuster that existed just when I came to the United States Senate 120 years ago.
At John Lewis's funeral, President Barack Obama said he believed the filibuster was a relic of the Jim Crow era. Do you agree?
Yes.
If not, why not abolish it if it's a relic of the Jim Crow era?
Successful electoral politics is the art of the possible.
Throughout Biden's career, one thing has been clear. He's happy to think and say whatever is needed to politically survive. If that means flip-flopping on any and all positions, so be it. Good old honest Joe, not quite.
If it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to... Anyway, we're going to get a lot done.